To talk to us about former President Jacob Zuma's appearance at the Zondo Commission this week, I'm joined in studio by Democracy Works Foundation Chairperson, Professor William Gumede. Prof, good evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, yes, sir.
Now, I'm trying to understand, what are the ground rules for any commission, in particular this commission, the State Capture Commission? Because there seems to be, they speak of a disconnect between former President Jacob Zuma and Advocate Pretorius.
You know, essentially it's really, really simple. It's quite basic. A commission is set up. So what a commission does, you've asked you voluntarily to come to the commission. If you've been implicated by, other witnesses, then, then you've been asked respond to the issues. All of the other people implicated have come to the commission. No one has complained, and so on. So I think, Mr. Zuma's complaint is the first time that anyone has complained. Now, a commission doesn't have prosecuting powers. So what a commission does, it recommends for prosecution, and so on. So really, a commission really investigates and brings up things into the public and then recommends for prosecution. So then it's the police, the National Prosecuting Authority that takes over.
Now, why is President Zuma being treated differently? Other witnesses have come forward and, his name came up a number of times. And seemingly when Advocate Pretorius is asking questions or putting forth questions and statements from witnesses, then at some point in time, Advocate Sikhakhane then stands up and says his client is being treated unfairly.
Mr. Zuma really is at the center. I mean, he is, if there's any star witness, he is a star witness, and so on. And he's been trying really hard not to actually appear, number one, at the commission. So a couple of months ago, what him and his lawyers asked for questions before the time. Now, that is unacceptable. That doesn't happen in a commission. No one before, got their questions ahead of time. I mean, he came to the commission this week voluntarily, and so on. So clearly, if you look at Mr. Zuma's previous strategy in other cases. Now, normally what happened in his strategy is what is, dubbed now a Stalingrad type of strategy. So the idea really is, first, you try not to get to a commission or not to the courts and so on. So that's the first part of the strategy. When that is not successful, you then try either to go there and then say, well, it's unfair questioning, and so on. And then, when you call back, you then try now to maybe appeal, to find other kinds of loopholes. So this is clearly a strategy. And unfortunately, Mr. Zuma doesn't come out very well in the strategy. When you go for that type of strategy, you immediately look guilty.
Now, we saw it from the beginning, from Monday, where he went through his history within the African Congress, African National Congress, positions, where he came to being the chief of intelligence in the MK movement, and building up from back in 1990 to present day, where there's been alleged plots and there's been issues of spying. There's been people implicated, people who, for instance, Mwakura Matlodi, Spiwe Nyanda, and these are people that have held very high positions within his government at some point in time. Former Spiwe Nyanda was the chief of defense for a very long time. Mwakura Matlodi was the justice minister at some point. How do we put these all together and bring it to date where they've come out and denied these allegations, and we've seen other ANC members or MK members coming out in their defense?
So Mr. Zuma's strategy really has been, you attack the witnesses. You don't respond to, there's some serious allegations have been made publicly against Mr. Zuma. Now, instead of responding to the allegations, he attack, you attack, the witnesses. Clearly, this is a classical diversion strategy. You deflect the attention from you to others. Now there's a whole there's chaos in the ANC because now there is almost close to the witch hunt of the witnesses. Now the witnesses came forward, trying to help the investigation, providing evidence, acting according to the consensus. Now, they are being attacked. So classically, this really is a diversion strategy from the Zuma camp.
Now, at this point in time, a lot of responses that was also gotten by the Commission is, I don't remember, I don't think I would have done that or I would have said that. I don't address people as mfowe to, little things like that. As you say, a deflection. And now the issue of Themba Masego, the former GCIS head. Big statements made and denial coming from former President Jacob Zuma. What are we to take away from this week's Zondo Commission of Inquiry?
I think what we clearly, that Mr. Zuma is really not serious of actually telling the truth. So clearly, if we look back this week, he is and his legal team are looking for loopholes out of this. They're trying to deflect, they're trying to postpone, and so on, and they're trying to cast aspersions on the witnesses, trying to create side shows, because if the ANC now is going to investigate its members for being allegedly spies and so on. So really, he doesn't look serious. Jokes, trying to be funny. The commission, this is very, very serious. Now, the problem really is here is, by acting in that way, he really is putting on the pressure on the Commission now, because the Commission now either has no option to subpoena him because, they have the power to do that. And they didn't, Judge Zondo clearly didn't want to do that at the beginning. He wanted to give Mr. Zuma the dignity to come to the Commission, respond to the allegations against him. Mr. Zuma clearly in his team makes this thing out as a joke. This is really very serious. So now, secondly, the Commission is also now, if they don't really treats Mr. Zuma in exactly the same way as all of the others, equal treatment, the Commission will lose its credibility and its authority. So really, actually, Mr. Zuma has actually put himself in a corner. I mean, this is not a victory for him, because now the pressure now is going to be on him, really. Although the strategy has been, his strategy and his legal team's strategy has been, look, let's divert, let's put a focus on the witnesses, let's create other side shows, and let's try to postpone, let's try to appeal, and so on. It doesn't come out good, it doesn't look good, it doesn't look credible, it doesn't look authoritative.
What does this do, and what does this mean for the African National Congress?
What it means for the African... this Stalingrad type of strategy, I mean, really the philosophy around such a strategy of Mr. Zuma and his legal team is they don't care as long as if they will destroy any democratic institution, including the ANC, if it saves the skin of Mr. Zuma. So they prepare to bring down the ANC, to crush the ANC, to break the ANC, as long as Mr. Zuma, is not investigated, is not prosecuted, and come out clean. I mean, really, that is really irresponsible. This political party that has been there for over 100 years, they prepare to break it, to end it, to save the skin of one individual.
Can the African National Congress take any action internally against former President Jacob Zuma?
Absolutely. The pressure now, again, is back to the ANC also. It's not only, the pressure on the Commission itself, but also on the ANC leadership, because the ANC leadership also, if they do nothing, they don't look credible. Even for Mr. Ramaphosa, he's much vaunted new dawn. If he doesn't appear as the leader of the party, president of the ANC, to discipline now, and so on, he also will look weak. So at the end of the day, both the ANC and the Commission, if they don't act against Mr. Zuma, bring some accountability, stop this impunity, disregard for democratic institutions, both the ANC and the Commission, won't look credible.
The Commission basically doesn't have a lot of time left with regards to its mandate and what it's put up to do, and to report back to the President and, of course, at some point the country and the nation. He has been touted to return to the Commission after an adjournment where former President Jacob Zuma wanted to walk away from the proceedings. And how do you think Justice Zondo convinced him to return and ensure that they finish what has been started from the beginning of the week?
I mean, clearly, in a sense, two things is happening here. Commissions also, and we didn't talk about it at the beginning, have a limited time frame.
Yes.
And so on. So clearly, it also appears to me that Mr. Zuma and his legal team, knowing that there's only a limited time span, if they can push it back and postpone and found ways not to appear, by the end of the time span of the Commission, then they would, Mr. Zuma would not have been interrogated here, and he would get away with it. I mean, that's one of the strategies. I think most probably, Judge Zondo most would say to Mr. Zuma, look, there's the final powers of the Commission is to subpoena you. And when we subpoena you, we'll ask you the questions that we want to ask. If you there was most probably a warning. If you think the line of questioning now is unfair, wait until we subpoena you, and then we really will be tough and harder.
Now, let's shift focus and move on to the current president, President Cyril Ramaphosa, who's got a cloud of the Public Protector's report with regards to a CR17 campaign. What are we to take from this report?
I mean, again, my worry is that a public protector, the perception of the public protector is that the public protector may be embroiled in the ANC's politics. And remember, the office of the public protector is a special constitutional office. You have to be above political fray. So it's the perception, there shouldn't be a perception that you are embroiled in party politics. That's the most dangerous. I mean, I'm not going to go into the merits of, whether, she's right and whether she's wrong. But, the moment there's a perception created that the office of the public protector is, supporting one faction or the other, then the authority of the office, itself is diminished.
Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, and one of the things, I think the public, ordinary citizens have the right to ask the public protector, why are you focusing on this case? And what about all of the big corruption cases?
Why is she focusing
billions
on
and
this
billions of
particular
money?
case?
Well, I don't know, but it does give the perception that it is politically motivated. Given if you're a neutral observer, if you're from Mars and you look down, you look at the public protector's activities, and you say, wow, there are billions of or there are corruption cases with billions of public money involved. Why focus on this case?
Now, what action can President Ramaphosa take in response to the Public Protector's report? And, is there what can he do in dealing with this issue?
Yeah, of course he can appeal, and he can take the Public Protector to court. Now, unfortunately for the Public Protector, her record, a couple of people in the past have taken her to court and she's lost it. So, so every time you lose as a Public Protector a legal case, it talks about you lose your credibility, the office loses its credibility, and so on. So if this is not watertight, it's very, very likely that she may lose this case again, and then she would have egg on her face, and the authority of the office, will be diminished.
Do you think this will affect President Ramaphosa's leadership in any way?
Absolutely, it will, because what it does is, because he has now have to focus on this case, so which means, he won't be able to properly govern because he has to deal with his case and so on. So clearly, I mean, he's not going to be unaffected.
Professor Gumede, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
That is Professor William Gumede, the Democracy Works Foundation Chairperson. He was joining us live in studio.